Okay, hello. I hope this is all working okay. I hope you guys are doing all right. We are live. You can see my hand, hopefully, and I can see your comments. So, by some miracle, we might be okay in terms of the technology stuff going on. And so, I hope you guys have your stuff ready for doing some drawing, because that's what we're going to be doing together. And we're going to warm up. So, why don't we do a very quick warm up because we're going to be drawing. We don't even need to be that loose for the first few drawings. So, because they're more like study. So why don't we just do some real quick spirals just to make marks on the paper. Do some spirals on the paper. Triangular spirals. Square spirals. Or we could even do like little circles inside circles. Try and keep them nice and close together. But you know, we're just trying to get loose rather than trying to be too tight, you know. And we could do 2 points on the paper and just try and connect them with some different lines and just get ourselves moving that way. So you guys just get into some warm-ups and check the comments. Hi Sue, hi Amelia. I've seen a lot of familiar faces and a few new ones. So there's German and Susanna. Hi everybody. I hope you're all doing well. Let me know if everything appears all right for you. You should see a funny looking skeleton on the right and some squiggles on the left. So hi Leslie, hi George. So nice to see all of you guys here. It's a beautiful sunny day here. Not that it makes that much difference because we can't go outside anyway. Well, that's not true. We can. Okay, so what we're going to work on today, and you guys keep warming up. I'm just going to introduce it a little bit. What we're going to work on today is the back. And the reason I wanted to work on it is when we used to go to life drawing and then the pose would kind of sit and then just have their back to me, I'd be like, wow, what do I draw? It's just a sort of flat surface with some funny bumps on it. How do I turn that into something, especially if they're not doing anything super dynamic with it? And this is an area I think a little bit of extra study of anatomy really comes into its own, because we're really familiar with the abs and the pecs and stuff on the front and the features of the front and even the sides, but I think the back, the anatomical features are less famous. So once you study it a little bit, it comes to life. But you know, we've got 60 minutes today, so we're not going to go and do everything and overwhelm ourselves, because some of you guys may already be familiar with this stuff, but if it's new, we're going to approach this like it's kind of new, right? And I think for a lot of people it would be new, so we don't want to overwhelm ourselves. So we try and keep it super simple, and then we can make it more and more sophisticated and accurate in the future. But you'll notice that this person on the right hasn't got any muscles. So we're going to start, I'm going to use a few colors for myself, but if you're just using one material, just go a little bit lighter in the early stages, because we're going to build up extra layers on top of this. Now, sometimes I'm going to draw with this on the iPad. So if you look at the skeleton guy on the right, you'll see I'm drawing a yellow line. Hopefully you guys can all see that, right? So what we're going to start with is just the overall shape of the rib cage, and then like maybe just like the angle across the pelvis, or just these that shape, but we want the angle across the pelvis. We'll try and get the line of the spine in and the shoulder blades. That's what we want right now. This is a 3D model provided for free by Scott Breton. And I think he's done a great job with it, keeping it kind of practical and simple and giving us a few different layers of so that's just like a big kind of egg shape for the rib cage. We'll get the curve of the spine in, get that those like little kind of coin shaped things on the pelvis, and those shoulder blades that float just above the rib cage, and they can move around their part of the shoulders, and they can kind of move around. So if the arms are raised, they're going to move like that, and if you kind of pull your arms back, they might move inwards and stuff like that. So just real light for now, because this isn't really what we're doing. What we're doing is the back muscles, but we want something to build them onto. So one thing to notice, if I go back to iPad drawing on the right, a little yellow line, see how, because this guy is kind of bending this way, this side's a little bit more stretched out, so there's a little bit of distance, but look how close the rib cage and pelvis are getting there. So you don't want to make that distance too big. Okay, are you guys getting on all right so far? Because I'm going to add on the next level. I'll give you guys a minute to do your... You don't have to add the skull. I'm going to add a little bit of it. I'll give you guys a minute to add your... to get your stuff in place. And then I'm going to add on the next layer, which is this. So this is the next layer, and I'm going to go back, drawing with yellow lines on the guy on the right again. This is the part, oops. This is the part that we're just going to add real lightly, because actually this isn't the focus of today either. So it's just these forms on the top. They kind of go one layer under the muscles that you see on the surface. I've seen there's two names for this. One is erector spinae and one is, I can't remember, but this blue one is kind of like two pipes or something on either side of the spine at the bottom, and then this one, it's a little bit wider and broader. And even though it's not right on the surface, it's worth just noticing them for now. These aren't the ones we're really studying today, but they do really affect the shapes that you see on the back. So there's like the two little pipe things at the bottom, and then this one, this red thing going up rib cage. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can also, just going back with yellow lines on the right side here, these green ones, that's the flank part, the bottom part of the external obliques. And they're really, really important. I think we had a whole video about these in February. So you can see that they kind of come down to the top of the pelvis, and they make a little bulge above the top of the pelvis. So we can add those in too. And what we're doing right now is we're not doing a proper drawing which is supposed to look really, really cool. We're doing study right now. So we're just trying to learn what's going on, right? We aren't trying to do a beautiful drawing. So it's all about learning right now. And especially if these are all new things, I wouldn't worry at all about how good the drawing looks. I would worry entirely about, oops, wow, that rubber's really dirty. Whether, I wouldn't even worry about memorizing all of this stuff, right? Just, if this is the first time, just take it in for the first time, and then, you know, usually it takes a few repetitions before anything really makes sense. So don't worry about anything really. Okay, we're going to add the next layer. And by the way, this is the book that I like to go to the most when it comes to anatomy. Like, anatomy is a funny one because, I'll just give you guys a little bit of time to add that. Anatomy is a funny one because I feel like when people do go too deep into anatomy with a drawing, it doesn't always look as fun and as expressive as other times, you know. On the other hand, if you allow yourself to be bold and free and are informed a little bit by anatomy, it can add so much. And I think the back is an area where that really comes true. Okay, so this is the final layer. This is the stuff that you might see on the surface. Let's go on to the right side here. You see that massive green kite shape one that just dominates everything in the middle and at the top? That's the trapezius. And that's one that you might be familiar with. The muscles like around the neck, they can kind of bulge out on really muscly people, stuff like that. This really awesome model, it doesn't entirely show exactly what it would look like on someone's back, because there's bits that have a lot of form that will bulge out a lot, and then there's bits which are going to be more flat and like tenderness. So like here around the shoulder blade, it might not be as bulging out, and down here it might not bulge out. So what I mean by that is, if you look at this guy, who we're going to look at later, you can see that this is his trapezius here. You can see that the shape, the way it's bulging out, it's not like that, like a big kite shape like that green one, because it's not bulging out here as much, you know. And so we'll get into that a little bit later, but just to point out that you might not see this exact kind of big kite shape bulging out on someone's back. But, you know, I hear Maggie in the background, very upset. And similarly, like with the lats, which are these purple ones, I think they really have a lot more volume and form around the sides. Once they kind of come down around here, they're quite thin. And that's why that one that we looked at before with the two little pipes and then the bigger thing, those kind of bulge out because this part is kind of thin. I hope that's making sense so far. Let's just draw what we're seeing here. And then we can get into like how it actually varies once you get onto a real person's back. But for now, let's just draw that green shape, the trapezius, even though it's not really going to appear quite like that on someone's back. Just try and remember where your shoulder blades are. And if you want to move them around or something, that's fine. Okay, so then we can add the purple one, that lat coming down. And goes right around the side and up into the armpit. If you guys did the armpit challenge, then you'll know that that one goes right up into the armpit. So it kind of starts down here and goes all the way up into the armpit. And we've still got those external obliques, the green ones on the side and the top of the pelvis. Okay?
2 questions.
Yeah.
Why didn't you start with the rib cage is one question.
Okay.
Is this model available on the web?
Okay, so we've had 2 questions. Why didn't I start with the rib cage? I did. It was that big oval egg shape at the beginning. You don't need to like draw all the ribs and everything, but just the big egg shape of it. And you don't even need to be perfect about it. And is it available on the web? Yes, it's available on the web. So I'll put the link up later. So we have covered, we've got the top of the pelvis, little bulge for the external obliques. Then we've got that lat coming up around the sides that will end up in the armpits. We've got shoulder blades. We've got the big trapezius shape. So now we're going to get into some muscles that are even less famous than these. So the first one, if you go back to the 3D model on the right, I'm going to do the yellow lines. Do you see this red one here? It's going in under the trapezius, but it's some kind of shape like that. It's called rhomboid. And sometimes you might see it, especially when the arms are raised up, the shoulder blades come out like this, they pivot round like that, and then you might see those ones under. So we could just put those in just something like that, right? And then perhaps more importantly, from the bottom of the shoulder blades, we've got the teres major, which is this one. Don't worry about the tiny yellow one there. We don't want to get into tiny stuff yet. We just want to get the big stuff for now. And then there's this one here, which is called the infraspinatus. So this is when anatomy can feel kind of intimidating. Like you've probably heard of the trapezius or the traps. You might have heard of the lats, and maybe even the external obliques. But infraspinatus and teres major and rhomboids, these are muscles that are not famous. And hearing these funny Latin names, for me anyway, makes it feel kind of overwhelming. But once we start looking at a model, I think it's gonna be really fun to see these things. So why don't we just draw those? Now, a couple of things. So I'll just draw them as they are on this model, and then we can talk about them a little bit more. Because those are the focus of today's lesson. It's not lesson, practice session. Trying to think of this as a practice session rather than a lesson, but it's kind of turning into a lesson. But that's because we've got to get used to this stuff. So I want you guys keep drawing that stuff. So this one, that's the infraspinatus, right? That's like on the shoulder blade. So we can see the edge of the shoulder blade here. Like if we go back to here, you know, we're seeing these edges of it poking out from the muscles. But on top of it is that muscle, the infraspinatus, and that's going to kind of come up to like the top of the upper arm bone. Because it kind of comes up to the top of the upper arm bone, it doesn't like stretch up too much when you raise your arms. Often it kind of looks like a sort of circular shape rather than the shape that you see here. So we'll see that later on. This teres major is a really cool one to start seeing. Maybe the most important one we're going to look at. It can be way bigger than what it looks like here. At least that's how it appears to me. And it attaches on to the upper arm bone a little bit further down. Like, so, I don't know where, like there or something. I'm not sure. But then when the arm raises, it's really going to need to stretch further to get there. So you'll see that big curve as it stretches up to a raised arm. And they can be pretty big. And sometimes the curvature of it kind of merges with the lat. Sometimes you'll see a very subtle curve difference. There's a curve for the teres major and then a curve for the lat. So we'll try and find that stuff on the model later, the real human being. And so the reason we can't see those attaching to the upper arm is because it all gets covered up by the shoulder muscle, the deltoid. But if that wasn't there, you'd see it all stretching up there. So a lot of this stuff, I don't think you need to memorize right now. But it's like an introduction. And I feel like, so why don't we draw on the deltoids? And I'll talk about the deltoid a bit more in a second. Guys, don't worry. Oh, I'm using the wrong color. Don't worry if you're making a mess, because we're taking notes. You know, like if you ever used to write essays at school or something, then you'd have to write notes. And the notes, I mean, if you're anything like me, they wouldn't be very tidy. But that's fine, you're just trying to think it through, right? The final essay at the end could be more neatly presented, but right now we're just taking notes, so it doesn't really matter what it looks like. So, and so, you know, just to keep going with that, if you study anatomy a bit more just for the back, and let's say this is the first time you're looking at this stuff, this could be the first introduction and you might forget all of it, and then the next time you get a little bit more of it and you kind of remember one extra thing, and then you do it again and you do it again and you do it again, and eventually you're totally cool with it. So don't worry too much if some of this stuff doesn't stay in your head. Okay, so I want to make a quick note about the deltoid. So what I want to say is that the deltoid what's the best way of showing it? Or maybe on this one. It comes, I think you can see it here, like if that's the shoulder blade, there you go. it comes in deep onto the shoulder blade is what I want to say. So it's not, I think people often think of the shoulders as like stuck onto the sides of, and even on this model, I think it's a little bit off to the side, and maybe because it's tucking in under the trapezius or something, I don't know, but it's going to come really deep, come back and attach really deep onto the shoulder blade. And on the front, it's going to attach quite deep onto the collarbone on the front. So the shoulder muscle is not like stuck on the side of the torso. It comes deep and attaches deep into the shoulder blade. So we covered, that's everything I wanted to cover today, and we can go over it a few more times. And you don't have to remember everything. But how are you guys doing? Let me check the comments. The 3D model comes from a website called Sketchfab, and it was made by an artist called Scott Breton, and you can get it for free, and I'll put a link later. So we have covered so much. If it is too much, don't worry, because we're going to go over it all a few more times, and then you can keep studying it later. And then the next time you have a pose with like just a model's back, instead of it just being a sort of flat, vague surface, hopefully it'll come to life. So give you guys a couple of, a little bit of time to keep drawing that, and then we'll move on to the next one. All of us want to know what app you're using on the right. So this is a 3D model. I just took a screenshot of a 3D model that is available on a website called Sketchfab. I am drawing on it using my iPad in an app called Procreate, but it wasn't made in Procreate. Someone says their notes would get graded in high school. Man, I don't think that's what notes are about. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on. Let's move on to this one. So, I'm going to turn a page. This is just the same thing. This time it's rather than a 3D model, it's a drawing of the anatomy from this book. And we're just going to study this drawing a little bit to get familiar. It's just like, look at it one more time. Look at it all one more time with just a different visualization of it. Now, one thing to note is when you're drawing a figure like a muscly person even, you might get tempted. So let's just put in the spine and... Okay, let me make this point. You guys put in the spine. You might be tempted to prioritize the anatomy. I think the anatomy is really the icing on the cake. So what really matters, I'm going to draw on the picture on the right now on the iPad. It's still like the big curves. It's still the angles of things. It's still the big shapes. And then all the little undulations and bumps of the anatomy comes after that. If you start to get too deep into all this stuff too early, it's going to look funny, It's going to look really nice if you can kind of establish the gesture of it and that kind of thing early on. And then think about the anatomy a little bit later into the process, I think. So you'll notice that so let's navigate this, what we're looking at, just to go over it again. We've got this trapezius. And this time you can see these, so this is all trapezius, yeah? You can see the parts which have a lot of volume in them, which are the kind of more red parts. And then the white parts are a bit more, I guess, tenderness or whatever, like they're a bit flatter. So there's actually a flat diamond bit right here on the base of the neck. So we can look for that. And you can see the shape, even though overall it's kind of this big kite shape, there's this bit is flatter. So the bit that bulges out is more shaped like that. And that's more the shape that we might see on someone's back, especially if they're muscly. And you can see that it comes down to the shoulders here. There's these bony bits on the shoulders, and they're called the acromions. And that's a really useful point to look for when you're looking at shoulders, because shoulders are a massive structure. So it's like, if I say draw the angle across the shoulders, it's like this is all shoulder. So what's the angle across them? You can find those bony bits and look for that angle. And then we've got the pelvis down here, and that's going to be like our scaffolding. So why don't we do the angle across the shoulders, across those like acromion points. It doesn't have to be perfect because we might fix it later. And then an angle across the pelvis. And then we're going to start to build up the muscles within this. So we could start to look for the trapezius shape. You notice he's raising his one arm. So that's pivoting the shoulder blade up and around. Got the shoulder blade? We should have put that in earlier. Shoulder blade. Bony bit of the shoulder blade there. So just going back to the picture, going to draw on it with yellow lines. That's the shoulder blade. It's kind of covered up by that infraspinatus. You can see it's written there. That one. And look how deep onto it the deltoid comes back, the shoulder muscle there. So just kind of reiterating those same points that we looked at from the first one. So we could start to build that on. And same on the other side. Look, if this is the shoulder blade, that deltoid's coming deep into it. Okay. And what should we do next? Maybe we could add the lats. I wonder if I've put the spine too far down. Doesn't matter. So, could do that shape of the lats. Do you know, I wanted to focus on the teres major and the infraspinatus, but it's kind of impossible to not go over everything because they're also kind of linked up together. So we've got the external obliques kind of spilling over or bulging out from the top of the pelvis. This is the bottom part of the external obliques. We've got these lats. Hello? Am I back with you guys? My computer crashed. Can you hear me over there?
I haven't got you yet.
I think it's maybe just a delay.
There's a delay.
So I think it's going to work by some miracle. All right.
Oh, people are saying yeah, we can.
Okay, we're back. Woo! What a harrowing moment for. I guess I heard some of you guys were saying that you needed to catch up anyway. So, I think back anatomy crashed my computer, guys. That's how complicated this is. All right. How are you getting on? We have back anatomy. We've got trapezius, we've got lats, external obliques, deltoids, shoulder blades. There's a lot going on, but we're just going to keep on going over it. Next up, we'll look at a real model, then maybe go back to another 3D model. Just go over it a few times. All right, I'm back. Awesome. I think it's maybe the sun was hitting the computer, overheating it perhaps. So you guys keep drawing this back. I'm just going to reiterate a couple of things, okay? So this shoulder blade on the right side here is pivoting up because he's raising his arm. If he was, for example, had his arms down, it would be more over this way, right? It might be more like that or something. And if he was to bring his arms back, it would come in towards the spine and squeeze that. Well, I mean, the trapezius would be part of what's bringing it in. It would squeeze, that muscle would be more squeezed and maybe bulging out a bit. So those are floating around, and they're going to move around as the shoulders move around and the arms move around. And his arm is raised, and just to reiterate this, because I feel like you can't say it enough, the teres major is part of the outline of the figure. Just like the external oblique, it's like it makes an important part of the outline of the figure, and we don't really think about them that much. But there they are, and hopefully you can look out for them. I think the teres major is like, you can actually see it even if the person's not a bodybuilder. A lot of this stuff is like, what is going on? I can't see it because the person's not a bodybuilder. But you'll be able to see the shoulder blades on most people. And once you kind of navigate the muscles, it's easier to find the shoulder blades. Because you know that there's, it kind of, the corner of it kind of tucks in towards the edge and maybe a little bit under the trapezius and stuff like that. And you can start to see this infraspinatus quite often too, but sometimes it's not that prominent, and sometimes it even is more of a dip rather than a raised bit. But the teres major, you're going to see. Sometimes they're really big. And I mean, the lat's a big part of the outline too. All right, guys. We are back. I have one dislike now. Fair enough. It's really helpful when you draw with yellow on the iPad. Thanks, Sandy. Cool. All right. Let's move on to a real human being. Now, I say real human being, but he is a bit of a specimen. I mean, super, super duper muscly. And I've had to cut his butt off because I'm not sure YouTube will handle someone's butt. So why don't we have a look here and see if we can find some of this stuff that we've been talking about on the diagrams on an actual person. And it's way easier to do this on a muscly muscle man. In the future, we'll try and do it on a normal, I mean, it's not that he's not normal, but on a more average build. But hopefully you guys can start to see some of the stuff that we've been looking at. So if we navigate this, obviously we have the spine coming down. Hard to see the rib cage, right? There's so much muscle on the top. It's hard to see the rib cage exactly where it is. But we can definitely navigate muscles that we've been looking at. We can probably see the top of the pelvis too, right? That we were putting in. Now, there's some kind of, obviously coming down from the base of his skull, down his neck towards his shoulders is the trapezius. And, on the first model we looked at, it was like this big kite shape. But on the second one, we realized that the bulging bit would have these bits cut off. And that seems to be borne out here. Because you can see all this bulging here. And it's not quite that kind of kite shape. And actually, I think it's cutting off there. And it comes up to the base of his neck. And then, do you remember we saw that there's a sort of more tendinous bit in a diamond shape at the base of his neck? Well, there it is. So that's cool. That's a little landmark that we can start to notice and look for. And then we know that the trapezius kite shape is going to kind of cross over the top corner of the shoulder blades. And we know that there's going to be a muscle coming down from the arm to the bottom of the shoulder blades. And so I think it's something like that, right? Something going on here. Some shoulder blades. And then I promised you guys that there would be this infraspinatus, and it would often kind of look like a rounded shape. Well, there it is. And if it takes a while to start to see this stuff, that's fine. And I'm still getting used to it. I might still make mistakes. Actually, it doesn't even really matter if you get it wrong, because unless the viewer of your drawing is an anatomy expert, who cares if you get it a bit wrong, right? I think the teres major here is just massive, right? And you can see it coming back to the bottom of the shoulder blade. And then coming down, you've got the lats, right? Making, like I said, they're going to make the outline. So that's cool. Why don't we try a different view of this guy? This one. So again, we've got his spine. Right? We're always aware of his spine. We've got that triangular, diamond-shaped landmark at the base of his neck. We have, what have we got? We've got his trapezius coming down to those bony bits of the acromion on the shoulders. We've got the bulging bits of his trapezius. We've got shoulder blades. We've got the sort of kind of ball shape, top of a ball kind of shape, infraspinatus. We've got teres major coming down, attaching to the bottom of his shoulder blades. We've got lats coming down under that. And even those two pipes that I was on about at the beginning at the bottom that go underneath, and then like a sort of broader, bigger thing, something underneath that kind of bulges out because the lats are quite thin. We've got external obliques. So it's starting to make a little bit of sense. Hopefully. So why don't we have a go at drawing this guy? And then we'll go back to the 3D models and just remind ourselves of this stuff. And try and draw that stuff again and just go over it and over it. And each time you'll kind of get more and more used to it. Okay. So why don't we start with that curve down the spine. Don't underdo it. And an angle across his shoulders, and then maybe something around his pelvis, which we can fix later. Keep it light, and then why don't we, try and build some kind of shape for his trapezius, maybe. Doesn't have to. Remember, guys, we're just studying, yeah. So, I think there's one of the tricky things about studying. Wait, I'm doing the wrong stuff. So one of the things about trying to learn to draw, I think, is that the desire to make something that looks good, the desire to have something that is beautiful at the end, gets in the way of the learning process, which isn't often a sort of ugly process. Like I was saying about the notes earlier. Your notes can be a total mess because that's how you kind of learn stuff. Okay, so I'm kind of doing random stuff here. So we've got the deltoids here. Remember, they kind of come in. So one thing about the deltoids is I think they do attach quite deep on the shoulder blade. But again, like with the trapezius, this bit isn't that voluminous. It doesn't have that much form. I think it's kind of it's quite a tendinous bit. So the bulging bit might not stretch really deep back onto the shoulder blade all the time. Okay. So we've got some kind of deltoid. We've got that kind of ball shape of the infraspinatus here and here. And we got a massive teres major, I think. Really big. And then his lats. And then it's going to come down. So.
Can you slightly lift?
Oh, yeah. So we're not trying to do anything other than just try and figure out what we're seeing. We've got that diamond shape thing around his neck. The other side, there's a lot of stuff in the shadow, in the dark, so we might just consider that all shadow shape. But we can definitely see that kind of ball shape infraspinatus. We can definitely see some of the teres major and some of the deltoid. Let's sharpen this pencil. I was planning on doing a little demo at the end about sharpening pencils because we had a question about it. But I'm not sure we're going to have time. So I want to go back to one more 3D model after this. Or we could do the other pose as well. So we're just trying to sketch this guy, and we're just trying to figure out what we're looking at in terms of his anatomy. One thing I'm trying to figure out, guys, is whether when we're doing these, I should always be thinking of something to say, or if I should just let you guys draw and have a moment of peace. I kind of feel like I'm not doing my job if I'm not saying stuff, but sometimes you probably just want me to shut up. All right, not amazing, but it doesn't matter because we're just studying anyway. Okay, so there's another pose. I'll give you guys another few minutes to study this one. And then we'll do the other pose. And then if we have time, we could even look at one more model. I'll just check the comments and see how you're doing. Can you please draw Scorpion from Mortal Kombat? We could do. I'm more of a Street Fighter 2 guy myself. YT can't handle bums. It is true. It's true. I used to think that it could handle at least bums, but it cannot. I mean, I get it. Like, I don't hold it against what YouTube for censoring some of this stuff, because God knows how much content is uploaded. Okay. So I think we might move on. Take your time. You don't need to constantly talk. It's hard to... Thank you. Yeah, it is hard to talk and draw. I love Street Fighter. Man. I haven't played Street Fighter since I was a kid, but I feel like I can still destroy almost anyone on Street Fighter. The last time I drew this guy, the back was really hard. Now it makes a lot more sense. Great. I think this guy's a great person to study for this stuff. Why does mine look like a hunchback? Don't worry though. We're just taking notes. We're just taking notes. We're not doing anything more than that. Okay. You know, you wouldn't worry if your notes at school were a mess, or at least I wouldn't. And that's all we're doing right now. Couldn't see the whole cover. The name of the book is Classic Human Anatomy by Valerie Winslow. It's really good. And there's good stuff on YouTube and everything else too. And even like medical stuff sometimes isn't bad. I mean, you don't want to draw people like a textbook. And I do think that if you get too obsessive about anatomy, that can happen. That's all right if that happens right now, because we're trying to learn it, right? But in one email from Lane Brown, he was telling me, like, you guys know Lane Brown, an artist I like. He was telling me, you know, it's good to know anatomy, it's good to study anatomy, but you don't want it to let it. You don't want to let it dominate your drawing or dominate even your observation. You do want, you know, there's the gesture and the feeling and just other observations, and then you can be and then all of that can be informed with a background understanding of anatomy. But that background understanding of anatomy is what we're trying to build now in this practice session. It's something that I want to build more, and especially in certain areas. So sorry, I'm just doing this, but what have we got? We've got those bony bits on the shoulders. So you can see, I'm going to draw in yellow again. The deltoid is like a kind of teardrop thing that kind of sprouts out from there, and then the trapezius comes down from the base of the skull towards this, and so it's a pretty good landmark, you know. Then we've got shoulder blades, and you can see that infraspinatus that I've been on about, and you can see the teres major coming down to the shoulder blade, and then the lat there. So you can see there's like the curve. It's pretty subtle, but there's a curve here and then another one here. And then above the pelvis, you can see there's one for an external obliques. So there's like these little muscles that you never heard of impacting the outline. And then instead of just kind of either ignoring them or drawing like random details, you can start to pick up on stuff that you're seeing and hopefully try and draw them with a bit more meaning. Like this is stretching up to the upper arm bone and stuff, you know. And you don't have to think about tons and tons of medical Latin names and stuff when you're drawing. You want to have fun when you're drawing, but if your eyes are picking up on this stuff and then you're still mainly just trying to express something, design something, you're merging shadow shapes to create a cool composition and stuff like that, but it's all a little bit informed by a little bit of anatomy, then I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, having said that, I can't tell you how many artists who I really enjoy their drawings and stuff, and they're very unique and interesting, and I say, so have you studied a lot of anatomy? And they go, I don't know anything about it, like nothing. And I think that's one of the reasons that they can come up with something unusual and interesting, is because they're not studying the things that anyone else is studying. They're just going by what they pick up on and notice themselves, and it's so personal. They've just drawn so many figures. They usually have studied their favorite artists, and like my mum, she does know a bit of anatomy, but she's not deep into anatomy. But her drawings, as soon as you see it, you know it's hers. It's very personal to her. Whereas sometimes you'll see someone who's done so much anatomy study that it's kind of taken out the personal side of it and made it a little bit veering towards the scientific. So I guess there's a balance there, isn't there? Because I really enjoy it. I've still got a lot to learn about it. You know, you study this stuff and you think, okay, I kind of know. But then you come across a back, for example, that is less defined or is in a funny position. And you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on here. But then you just draw what you see and do your best. And the viewer doesn't know what they're looking at either, so. It's funny though, because sometimes if you make the anatomy nice, even if the viewer doesn't know any anatomy, it makes a difference to how pleasing it is to their eye. Because they know, but because they don't know, but they do know, you know. Like we know the human form so well, even if we haven't explicitly studied it. All right, how are you guys getting on? Check the comments. Who are you referring to who hasn't studied anatomy? I don't know if I want to kind of cool. I don't know if they want me to say that they never studied anatomy. So you email me and I'll email you back. Balance in all things, even anatomy. Yeah. I'm amazed you can draw and talk at the same time. Thanks, Julie. I'm getting a little bit more used to it. I'm trying to do these lives partly to just. Obviously, it's mainly because people don't have life drawing in the lockdown, but also for me personally, I think it's just good practice to. Like, I once met an artist who told me in New Zealand, and she told me that what she was looking for was the unself-conscious line, which is very profound. And I think it's like, when you're drawing, I feel like you get quite self-conscious. And I'm definitely very self-conscious when doing this with so many people watching. And I'm just trying to kind of inoculate myself to it because I want to get to a stage where I'm less self-conscious. So I feel like if I do this every week, I might just... Maybe eventually I'll just stop worrying about what the drawing looks like and just get in, just enjoy the process more and more. Okay. I think I'll have to go over this again, says Amelia. My first time thinking about anatomy. Definitely do it. Go over it. Like I said, I think you just layer it, right? You build like a brick wall. And actually, you don't want to just keep going over and over anatomy, but you want to balance it with your gesture and your simplified forms and light and dark and line quality and stuff. So you can have like a first layer. So if it's like a brick wall of study, I think it will be like, you study your gesture and your forms and some proportions and stuff. And the anatomy that you need for this level is like, you already know it. It's like the rib cage and the spine and stuff. And then, you do the next layer of all of these various skills, whatever they are. And then you just add a little bit of an anatomy each time. And then maybe towards the top, you have a bit of extra anatomy. So you have less at the bottom and a bit more at the top, when your gestural skills and your simplified forms are more built up. So in the brick wall, I think anatomy, you don't even need for the first layer because you already know what you need to know. You just need to find the bony landmarks and stuff that you already kind of know. And then the next layer, it's just a little bit. But once you get towards the higher levels and you're feeling more and more confident, you can increase it more and more. Okay, so why don't we do... What should we do? We have 3 minutes. I feel like this has been so I feel like we should do something other than anatomy to end this whole thing. What could we do? How about we draw this guy again? Okay, this is something I haven't done for ages, but we use our other hand. I don't know. Actually, that would be... is that pointless? There's no point doing anatomy with the wrong hand. Why don't we draw him without worrying about the anatomy too much? Just draw this guy and use the wrong hand and do it blind. So we're not looking at the page because it's all been a bit stuffy, hasn't it? So just to do something totally nuts, not nuts, but something that doesn't make any sense.
Someone wants to know what pencil you're using.
This is a General's charcoal pencil. It's really nice. It's hard to find in the UK though, but there's loads of cool pencils you can get anyway. So, all right. So I'm gonna draw this. Normally I draw my left hand. I'm gonna draw my right hand. I'm not gonna look at the paper. So it's blind. Not worried about the anatomy. Not worried about anything. We could try and draw the anatomy, but we're just gonna not care. Just gonna draw and not really care. So it's blind and it's with the wrong hand. So just want to loosen up. It's like stretching after weightlifting or something. I feel like we've done lots of weightlifting looking at all these muscles. I don't even know what I've drawn. I've drawn his head. Anyway. Okay, there you go. There you go. There it is to end it. Thanks for staying with me through the technical problems, guys. I hope that it was interesting. Loads of information, and we can go through that again in the future, and we can try and look at different physiques. You know, we can look at some female models, and we looked at quite an extreme muscular figure today to start with, but we could look at other stuff later on. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next week, probably at the same time. So take care, everybody. I hope you're doing all right, and yes, see you next time.